Hello everyone, my name is Rob, welcome to Kinetic Rugby League. In this video, I'll be giving you my NRL Round 5 predictions. So I'll leave last week's recap up on the screen for you now. And again, there's still a lot more red than I would like, but I'm actually very confident for this week. Very, very confident. Normally I'm quite confident with my predictions, but I'm actually feeling an 8 out of 8 this week. I've not had one yet. We've had a 7 and 4 3s, but yeah, that doesn't sound great, does it? But I'm very confident this week, so I'll crack on with the first game, which is probably the toughest one of the week, to be honest, but we'll crack on with that. And yeah, we'll get a perfect week, shall we? So kicking things off in round 5, we have Melbourne Storm versus Brisbane Broncos, starting with the team list of Melbourne Storm. In the backs, they have Ryan Papenhuyzen, Will Warbrick, Remus Smith, Nick Meaney, Xavier Coates, Cameron Munster and Jerome Hughes. In the forwards, Tui Kamikamica, Harry Grant, Josh King, Sean Bloor, Eliezer Katoa and Trent Liaro. And on the bench is Taron Wishart, Christian Welch, Tepai Moroa and Alec McDonald. Looking at the team list of the Broncos now, in the backs they have Tristan Saylor, Jesse Arthurs, Tony Staggs, Selwyn Cobbo, Dane Mariner, Ezra Mam and Adam Reynolds. In the forwards they have Corey Jensen, Billy Walters, Fletcher Baker, Jaden Hunt, Jordan Rickey and Patrick Carrigan. And on the bench is Tyson Smoothie, Benjamin Tekura, Kobe Hetherington and Corey Oates. So, I think you guys know what I'm going to point out first. Cameron Munster and Jerome Hughes, they are now available. So this could get pretty spicy for Melbourne Storm. And of course, the two key misses for the Broncos, Reece Walsh and Payne Haas. Both of which are... Well, Payne Haas is definitely the most important player in the forwards. Reece Walsh is top 2 most important in the backs. I think he's on par, or you could argue best or below Adam Reynolds in terms of importance for those backs. So they are huge misses still, and against a Melbourne Storm team that is going to be well rested off the bye, that is going to have full focus on the Broncos and has done full week's research on how they play, what they like to do, and they've had some injuries to deal with, but they will have a good idea of what the Broncos will try and do. Tristan Saylor is someone that they'll target relentlessly, I reckon. They'll probably try and go at Selwyn Cobbo a little bit, only because he's still going to be slightly unfamiliar in that centre position. He's still a talented player and has dealt with, the transition, I think, fairly well so far this season, but he's not been perfect. That being said, the Broncos have had a bit of a shaky start. Some good, some bad. Some really bad, actually. But they're doing okay. And I think they will disrupt this Melbourne Storm team from time to time. And maybe there'll be some issues in there with Munster and Hughes. Obviously, Hughes missing last week and Munster's first game of the season. There could be some issues with execution. Could be a little bit off. But I'm still relying on Ryan Papenhuyzen, Harry Grant to really carry that. And players like Munster and Hughes are two players that you could kind of throw into any team in this league and they will perform just at an exceptionally high level. So I'm not too worried about them kind of being thrown into this one for the first time this season. It is a tough opponent to have to kind of come in against. But as I said, with them being on a bye, they've had extra days to train and to develop this and to work on it. So I still think Melbourne Storm are definitely the favourites in this game, looking at these teams on paper. And as I said, they'll be well rested, and there's a few areas that they can look to exploit in this Broncos team. I still think, given their performance last week, there's no way to just write them off completely. I still think they'll be competitive, but just overall, Melbourne Storm will be a bit more relentless against the deficiencies of this Broncos team. So I'm going to go with the Melbourne Storm to win 1-12 points. Next up, we have the Canterbury Bulldogs versus the Sydney Roosters, starting with the team list of the Bulldogs. In the backs, they have Blake Taff, Blake Wilson, Jacob Kiraz, Stephen Crichton, Connor Tracy, Matt Burton, and Drew Hutchison. In the forwards, they have Max King, Reid Marnie, Samuel Hughes, Viliami Kickout, Josh Curran, and Jamin Salmon. And on the bench is Kurt Mann, Harrison Edwards, Liam Knight, and Kitione Katoga. Taking a look at the team list now of the Roosters. In the backs, they have James Tedesco, Daniel Tupou, Joseph Sawali, Joey Manu, Dominic Young, Luke Keary and Sam Walker. In the forwards, they have Jared Warrior-Hargreaves, Brandon Smith, Lindsay Collins, Nat Butcher, Angus Crichton and Victor Radley. And on the bench is Connor Watson, Nafahu White, Sitili Tupanua and Terrell May. The Roosters are a weird one. From what we expect of this team, they are a bit of a weird one this season because we've seen, certainly against the Rabbitohs, that they can dominate games and really just completely crush teams. But we've seen against the Manly Seagulls, they can have poor individual performances and as a team just offer very little, make a lot of mistakes and lose control of the game and just gift it away. And they did that again for me last week. They just, they had some opportunities, but a lot of the field position was just gifted from poor individual performances. The Bulldogs, I still think, have a long way to go. They can certainly take digs at the Roosters this week and they can challenge them. I think they can spread the ball fairly well. The kicking game will be an issue. Tedesco is extremely reliable, but anyone coming up against a Matt Burton kicking game is going to have to deal with some very, very tasty kicks. So best of luck to James Tedesco there. But I don't know. Luke Keary and Sam Walker, I still think is the best bet right now. But they've got some work to do. They've got some serious work to do. I think that individual performances, in terms of individuals like for like compared to the Bulldogs, they are better on paper. And that's what I'm kind of expecting will be, the main factor for a Roosters win. I'm still not completely confident in a Roosters win, only because the two performances I've seen against the Panthers and the Seagulls were just individually poor. So they give me a bit of distrust towards the Roosters, but the Bulldogs are still so far off what the Roosters have produced so far this season. So I'm more than happy to lean towards the Roosters in this one. So I am going to go with the Roosters to win 13+. Next up, we have the Newcastle Knights versus St. George Illawarra Dragons. Starting with the team list of the Knights. In the backs, they have Kalen Ponga, Thomas Jenkins, Dane Gagai, Bradman Best, Inari Taula, Jack Cogger and Jackson Hastings. In the forwards, they have Jacob Saifiti, Jaden Brayley, Leo Thompson, Tyson Frizzell, Kai Pearce-Paul and Adam Elliott. And on the bench is Phoenix Crosland, Daniel Saifiti, Jack Hetherington and Matt Croker. Taking a look at the Dragons team list now. In the backs, they have Tyrell Sloan, Zach Lomax, Mosesi Suli, Jack Bird, Michaeli Ravalawa, Cal Flanagan and Ben Hunt. In the forwards, Francis Molo, Jacob Liddle, Jack DeBellin, Luciano Leilua, Jaden Sewer and Tom Eisenhuth. And on the bench is Jesse Marshgay, Blake Laurie, Michael Molo and Raymond Vitella Mariner. A few interesting changes there, of course. There's no Tyson Gamble in there to what we usually see. Jackson Hastings is back into the team. There was a whole bunch of shenanigans going on last couple of weeks with getting dropped. I can imagine an absolutely relentless performance from Jackson Hastings. It might not be perfect because I don't think he's a perfect number 7, but you can bet your backside that he's going to give it everything to essentially show the head coach what for. Now, the Dragons are an interesting one because they're actually doing better than I expected, but they've still managed to be the very same Dragons from last season. They've had a very up and down year because, as well as being themselves or the team that we expect them to be, they've also been definitely better than I expected at times. And there's been some stuff from Cal Flanagan which I've quite liked. Ben Hunt still leads the team around very nicely. And just with Sully and Bird, I'm not their biggest fans really, but they're doing alright. Just based on expectations alone. But this night's team is looking really strong. Jack Cogger at 6, I think, still has more to show in his career, but he's still got a long way to go. I want to say he's only 24. I think. So he's still got a ways to go. Jackson Hastings, I think, is a reliable 7. He's not perfect, but he's reliable. Kalen Ponga knows how to take over games. So I do think that this night's team also isn't perfect. They've had their poor moments, but I think they've just got more individuals that can dominate games, really. So I'm going to edge it towards them, but I don't think it's going to be a complete blowout because I like some things that the Dragons have done, and they do look a lot more resilient at times, and they look like creating opportunities at times as well. So I'm going to go with the Knights to win, 1 to 12 points. Next up, we have the South Sydney Rabbitohs versus the New Zealand Warriors, starting with the team list of the Rabbitohs. In the backs, they have Latrell Mitchell, Isaac Tuatupo-Thompson, Jack Whiten, Isaiah Tass, Tanya Milne, Cody Walker, and Dean Hawkins. In the forwards, they have Tavita Totola, Damien Cook, Tom Burgess, Keen Kalamatangi, Jacob Host, and Cameron Murray. And on the bench for the Rabbitohs is Michael Cheekam, Talis Duncan, Sean Kepi, and Davey Moale. Taking a look at the Warriors team list now, in the backs they have Chance Nickel-Klokstad, Dallin Watene-Zelezniak, Rocco Berry, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, Marcelo Montoya, Tamari Martin, and Sean Johnson. In the forwards is Adam Fanua-Blake, Wade Egan, Mitch Barnett, Jackson Ford, Marata Niokore, and Toy Harris. And on the bench is Freddie Lussick, Tom Ale, Bunty Afoa, and Jazz Tavanga. Now, we have almost the full ensemble of the Warriors here. Nickel-Klokstad's in there, Watene-Zelezniak, Tuivasa-Sheck, Sean Johnson, but there's no Metcalf. But in comes Tamari Martin. Now, he was at the Broncos, I think it was 2 years ago. And he showed a lot of promise there. Was a very versatile fullback. He got involved in a lot of the attacking plays, individually created a lot of great moments. Transitioned to number 6 when he moved to the Warriors, and unfortunately, after having some good weeks, picked up a lot of injuries and was out for a while. I think he had some game time last year when he came back, but soon out of the squad again. I think, given the current structure of this Warriors team, compared to the structure of this Rabbitohs team, they are far superior. I think there'll be a little bit of rust there from Tamari Martin at this point. But his aggression just matches perfectly with the culture of this Warriors team. So he will be going at, fully going at teams. A little bit, as I mentioned, about Jackson Hastings for the Knights. Different play style, of course, but in terms of just readiness, and hopefully he's just going to be a real ruthless runner, because they've got individuals to do that. Nickel-Klokstad is a pain in the backside, so is Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, and so is Sean Johnson when he's, dipping and darting left, right and centre. So Tamari Martin in there as well is a huge inclusion, and I cannot wait to see him play. I really hope that he can start having healthy seasons. Maybe he needs to move on to get more game time elsewhere, but yeah, just on an individual point, I'm looking forward to seeing Tamari Martin. I don't know if Dean Hawkins is really the answer to the lack of answers that Lachlan Ilias provides at number 7. Even though the Rabbitohs came out with their first win, I'm still not convinced. They're still going to have their issues. Cody Walker can change games, Latrell Mitchell can change games, but it's just too few and far between so far this season. I always think that the forward pack can dominate every game, but against Barnett and Fanua-Blake, Ford, Niokore, Toy Harris is going to be very difficult to do. I love the aggression and speed of this Warriors team. They don't really have the wins to show for their decent performances yet. Just the 1 or 2 now. But I think they should be firm favourites in this game. I think there's the potential for the Rabbitohs to keep it somewhat close and not let the Warriors run away with this one, because I still think individually the Rabbitohs have great players in there. But I think I'm quite comfortable going with the Warriors, so I'm going to take the Warriors to win 1 to 12 points. Next up, we have the Manly Seagulls versus the Penrith Panthers, starting with the team list of the Seagulls. In the backs, they have Tom Trbojevic, Tommy Tallow, Tolu Kula, Ruben Garrick, Jackson Parlow, Luke Brooks, and Daly Cherry Evans. In the forwards, they have Taniela Paseka, Lachlan Croker, Josh Olave, Hamol Olakwatu, Ben and Jake Trbojevic. And on the bench is Carl Lawton, Corey Waddell, Toa Sipley, and Nathan Brown. Taking a look at the team list now of the Panthers. In the backs, they have Dylan Edwards, Sonia Taruva, Isaac Tango, Taylor May, Brian Toto, Jerome Luai, and still Brad Schneider. In the forwards is Moses Leota, Mitch Kenny, James Fisher-Harris, Luke Garner, Liam Martin, and Isaiah Yeo. And on the bench for the Panthers, they have Dane Laurie, Lindsay Smith, Liam Henry, and Matt Eisenhuth. Two very key things from last week's performances. Number one, expectations of the Seagulls were a lot higher, and what they delivered were exceptionally low. So there's one thing. If the Seagulls were dominant against the Dragons, and there were some issues with execution from the Panthers due to Brad Schneider being in there, as opposed to Nathan Cleary, then I would have thought, this is a tough one. But given that the Seagulls did not dominate against the Dragons, and Brad Schneider did not make the Panthers look any less clinical in attack, I'm more than happy to lean towards the Panthers on this one. You know, I mentioned last week about Brad Schneider's performances that he had in Super League and the Challenge Cup with Hull Kingston Rovers, and he was quite impressive there. He was even more impressive than I kind of expected. I knew that he was going to offer something for the Panthers, but I just didn't expect that. He just was so in control. His level of confidence and his energy was just really impressive. And given the boots he was filling in that game, fair play to Brad Schneider. Fair play. The rest of the team did their jobs beautifully. The Seagulls are still a bit of a question mark. I think they're still, a real solid team. They will pose questions. They will find ways to open up teams. Of course, they will with players like Brooks, Cherry Evans, and especially Trbojevic in there. Tom Trbojevic, I mean. And players like Hamol Olakwatu will, rip defences open on the edge. But the Panthers just are too clinical right now. And I wasn't sure the first couple of weeks because they looked a tad off. But they've kind of, they've dusted off the shoulders a bit and they are now, they're flying. And even with Cleary missing and Schneider coming in, they are flying at the moment. So, given the performances from these two teams last week, also James Fisher-Harris now comes back into the team. He was missing last week. So, yeah, huge help for them in just being as resilient as they normally are through the middle in the forward pack. So, yeah, I think maybe last week is a bit of an outlier for the Seagulls, but I don't think they'll be so far away from the Panthers. Like a few of these other games I've mentioned, I'm still very confident in the Panthers, but I don't think it'll be to the point where it's a complete blowout. It could be, but I'm going to give the Seagulls the benefit of the doubt and make it a somewhat competitive scoreline. So I'm going to take the Panthers to win 1 to 12 points. Next up, we have the Dolphins versus the West Tigers, starting with the team list of the Dolphins. In the backs, they have Hamiso Tabai-Fidel, Jermaine Asako, Jake Avarillo, Herbie Farnworth, Jack Bostock, Cody Nikarima, and Isaiah Katoa. In the forwards, Jesse Bromwich, Jeremy Marshall-King, Thomas Flegler, Felice Kafusi, Ewan Aitken, and Ray Stone. And on the bench for the Dolphins, Josh Kerr, Kurt Donahue, Mark Nichols, and Kenneth Bromwich. Taking a look at the team list now of the West Tigers. In the backs, they have Jarian Bula, Charlie Staines, Solomona Fartape, Justin Olam, Junior Tupou, Jaden Sullivan, and Aiden Caesar. In the forwards is Stefano Otokamanu, Api Coruscant, David Clemmer, Isaiah Papali'i, John Bateman, and Fanua Pole. And on the bench is Letu Fainu, Alex Seyfarth, Alex Twal, and Samuel Fainu. So, the West Tigers are world class, I guess. And so is Aiden Caesar. Who would have thought? Certainly not Leeds Rhinos fans. The West Tigers. Nice job. I backed them last week. Of all the games that I was really confident in last week, the Tigers were at the bottom of my list of confidence. And they just got it done. Granted, it was a 1 point gap, but they got it done. They competed with a pretty solid Eels team, so fair play. The resilience of the Tigers has been quite impressive. My biggest concern, but there is a caveat to that, my biggest concern is that Galvin isn't going to be playing this week, and Jayden Sullivan is a bit of a question mark. On the flip side, if Aiden Caesar is going to be controlling games, is going to be taking care of all that stuff, and they just need Jayden Sullivan to run with the ball, I can get behind that, because I think as a ball runner, I think he can offer something, and he can pose questions for defences. But when it's on him, when the weight is on him to control things, nah, not happening. But with Aiden Caesar there, maybe it's a partnership that works out quite well. Dream Bula will continue to improve week in, week out. Still very young, a lot of potential, and is continuing to improve and will improve. Justin Olam will always be a powerhouse at centre. He is an unbelievable player. I just think over the entire squad, the Dolphins are just stronger. But given that it wasn't a case of the Tigers just picking up a win, like an impressive win against the Sharks, and then just dropping off, they backed it up the next week, which is impressive to me. I still think the Dolphins are clearly the stronger team, but I think maybe previously, if the Tigers lost or were dominated against the Eels, I would have easily gone with a 13 plus for the Dolphins. But given that the Tigers have proved it in back-to-back weeks that they can be resilient, they can compete, I think 12, 1 to 12 is still a fair assessment, because for me, the Dolphins are still the stronger team. So even though I haven't really mentioned them yet, Tabai Fidel, Avarillo, Farnworth, Nikarima, Marshall King, just to name a few, are game changers. They can make things happen from nothing. The Dolphins have looked really impressive, and for me, are clear top 8 contenders. Whether they can push for top 4, not sure yet. But yeah, the Dolphins are clearly the better team, but I don't want to disrespect the Tigers after they've put in solid back-to-back performances. But I'm going to go with the Dolphins to win 1 to 12 points. Next up, we have the North Queensland Cowboys versus the Gold Coast Titans, starting with the team list of the Cowboys. In the backs, they have Scott Drinkwater, Cal Felt, Valentine Holmes, Zach Labour, Murray Talangi, Tom Dearden, and Chad Townsend. In the forwards, they have Jordan McLean, Reece Robson, Jason Tamalolo, Kula Kefu, Finofe Uaki, Jeremiah Nanai, and Ruben Cotter. And on the bench for the Cowboys, Jake Granville, Griffin Neem, Sam McIntyre, and Jack Kosevsky. Taking a look at the team list now of the Titans. In the backs, they have Jaden Campbell, Harley Smith-Shields, Brian Kelly, AJ Brimson, Jojo Fafita, Kieran Foran, and Tanner Boyd. In the forwards, Moeki Fotueka, Chris Randall, Jamin Jolliffe, Cleese Haas, Bo Fermor, Erin Clark, and on the bench is Sam Verrills, David Fafita, Joe Stimson, and Josiah Pahulu. So, a few names there I definitely butchered, so I apologise. The Cowboys are an interesting one because they've had their real dominant moments, but I don't think they've been perfect yet. There are still some issues with their team, and I think the game against the Broncos was a clear indication of that, but also the game against the Knights was a clear indication of it as well. So they do deserve credit with the kinds of performances they put in, but it needs to be acknowledged they've not been perfect. However, fortunately for them, they're coming up against a Titans team that, even though I will constantly bang on about teams being great on paper, like the Titans, they should be easily top 8 competitors. Not guaranteed top 8, but at least compete for top 8. They are awful so far this year, in attack and defence. I don't know what is going on. I expect a lot better with Des Hasler in there, especially what he was able to produce or get out of the Seagulls a couple of years ago with their attack. And with the players they have on paper, I expected so much more from this team. Defensively, they are shocking. I guess slightly improved last week. Maybe Jaden Campbell can be a game changer and offer up some questions there. Kieran Foran's been around the block, for plenty of years. But, will continue to lose pace year on year. I still think Scott Drinkwater and Tom Dearden will produce moments from absolutely nothing. That is what they do. Chad Townsend getting a little bit more involved with the run game from time to time the last couple of weeks, but is still not perfect with his kicking game. I think some of his decisions aren't quite on point, but the forward battle for me, it leans heavily in favour of the Cowboys. So I think in terms of field position, it'll lean towards the Cowboys. And in the backs, in attack and defence, leans towards the Cowboys as well. I'm still waiting for one of those weeks where the Titans come out and, we finally say, that's what we've been waiting for. But I just don't think it'll happen against the Cowboys. There are some issues in there defensively with the Cowboys, so maybe there's a few more points in there than expected for the Titans, but I'm going to go with the Cowboys to win 13+. Finally, in round 5, we have the Canberra Raiders taking on the Parramatta Eels. Starting with the team list of the Raiders. In the backs, they have Jordan Rapana, James Schiller, Matthew Timoko, Sebastian Chris, Xavier Savage, Ethan Strange, and Jamal Fogarty. In the forwards is Josh Papali'i, Danny Levy, Joseph Tarpany, Hudson Young, Atta Moriata, and Morgan Smithies. And on the bench for the Raiders is Tom Starling, Corey Horsburgh, Simi Sasage, and Pasami Saulo. Sasagi, we'll go with that one. Take a look at the team list now for the Eels. In the backs, they have Clint Gutherson, Mike Acevo, Will Penasini, Bailey Simonson, Sean Russell, Blaise Talangi, and Dylan Brown. In the forwards, they have Regan Campbell-Gillard, Joey Lussick, Junior Barlow, Sean Lane, Ryan Matheson, and Jermaine Hopgood. And on the bench for the Eels, they have Luca Moretti, Remu Gregg, Joe Afengawi, and Kelmi Talangi. The Raiders came up against a really strong Sharks team, and I did back them to win, but the Sharks were too strong. I was thinking after their performance against the Tigers, maybe there's some question marks we had there, but I think I went a bit too far the other way with that game. The Raiders have still been good. They do have their issues in there. They can be opened up defensively, which is an issue, but it's whether this Eels team is going to do that. The Eels are always, for me, too up and down. Because one week they can compete against the Panthers, take them right to the end, and either win or lose, but just be respected for their competitiveness. But then the next week, lose to like a bottom 3 Bulldogs, Dragons, or Tigers team. It's just, the Eels are just a really weird team. I hate betting for or against the Eels because they always mess me up. But with that consistency, makes me lean towards the Raiders because they have been strong. If you take a look at the 2 losses they've had, the Warriors and the Sharks, you could forgive them for losing to the Warriors and the Sharks. They are easily top 8 teams. Easily. And both of those, you could argue, given a few more weeks, we'll see whether either of those teams are clearly top 4 contenders. It's possible that the Sharks are, possible that the Warriors will get to that point, but you can forgive the Raiders for taking, 2 L's against those teams. The Eels, managed to pull out a win against an inconsistent, as we know at this point, an inconsistent Seals team, and lost to a West Tigers team that we know are clearly resilient at this point, but I still think, even though I took the Tigers to win, could probably still be doing better, but again, this is without Mitchell Moses. So that's still another key indication for me that the Raiders should be favourites here. Ethan Strange, another young player this season that's been performing well, such as Galvin at the Tigers. He is also going to improve week in, week out, and the more weeks that they get under their belts, working with Jordan Rapana, who is going to be adjusting to fullbacks, normally on the wing, or from last season anyway, so he's still going to adjust to it. But Ethan Strange will improve week in, week out. He'll learn the nuances of Jamal Fogarty, who is a very reliable game manager, and Danny Levy, who is, really reaping the rewards, if I could speak properly, from consistent game time, which is great to see. Corey Horsburgh, getting some more minutes would be nice. He's a very impactful forward player. And just on paper, in the forward pack, should be fairly even, but I am going to lean it slightly towards the Raiders on this one. They'll be missing Zach Hosking, but I just think overall the Raiders, in the forwards, they tend to get it done. And are a little bit more reliable. I just trust them a bit more. So with that being said, I'm going to go with the Raiders to win 1-12 points. So to recap my round 5 predictions, I'm going to take Storm to win 1-12, Roosters to win 13+, I'm going to take the Knights, Warriors, Panthers, Dolphins all to win by 1-12, Cowboys 13+, and Raiders to win by 1-12. In terms of winners' confidence, I'm actually about 95%. I think there's one game in there that's questionable, and there's two that are potential doubters depending on the day performance. The one that's questionable for me is Melbourne Storm. I think the Broncos could still win that one, but I'm still very confident with the teams on paper and the preparation for Melbourne Storm that they should win this one. And then the two kind of doubtful games, depending on the day performance, I think the Knights against the Dragons. I wouldn't put it past the Dragons to come out with a surprising performance, and I wouldn't put it past the Eels because it's just a very Eels thing to do in terms of beating the Raiders. They have lost back-to-back weeks, but again, the teams that the Raiders have played against, it's not the end of the world. It's the Warriors and the Sharks, for God's sake. So, winners' confidence, 95%. In terms of margin confidence, I'm at about 85%. I think there's a few that could go to a 13+. And there's maybe the Bulldogs keep it close against the Roosters. So, I'm very confident this week, hoping for an 8 out of 8. But yeah, that's my recap for this week. So that's going to be it for this video. If you have your own predictions, do let me know in the comments down below. Also, let me know how you got on last week. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with more Rugby League content. But that's going to be it. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.